In this video, I'm going to walk you through on how to build a fully functioning voice-based AI agent for a business that can answer customers' questions and handle appointment bookings, including suggesting alternate slots when the calendar is full. Hey everyone, my name is Konstantinos and I specialize in building advanced AI agents that have the potential to transform how businesses operate daily. In this specific build, we'll be utilizing platforms that are at the forefront of the AI boom as we all know it, such as Voiceflow, Make, and Airtable. We'll integrate everything together and I'll show you the full flow, step by step, as I build this live for a customer, which in this case is hair salon. Now, by the length of this video, you'll realize there is a lot to cover, but if you're a person building AI solutions or if you're a business owner, I can guarantee that if you make it through the end, you'll have a clear understanding of how AI can automate real conversations and improve customer experience without adding overheads. So without further ado, let's dive right in and see the structure of our build. All right, so let's break down our build for today. So we have a Figma boards, and what we see here is a user who is placing a call to the salon, and instead of a human customer support agent, our Voiceflow agent is going to take the call, and we'll have two different functionalities basically. The first one, which we're going to build inside this Voiceflow, is a knowledge base, answer from a knowledge base, where the user will be able to ask any question about the business, like location, prices, etc. And our agent is going to search the knowledge base, which would be a PDF document, and pull back the answer and feed the answer back to the user. And the second functionality we'll add will be an appointment booking tool, which will trigger via an API call, which is going to trigger an automation in Make, and the automation is going to move and query our Airtable base, which will include our entire slot structure and slot logic for availability based on the customer's requested date and time. Now, if the slot is available, we'll communicate this with a number 1. Make is going to receive the answer from Airtable, and if it's available, we're going to update our Google Calendar and reflect that for our customer support agents in the salon to follow and see. If the slot is not available, our automation rather in Make is going to trigger another function, which is going to find an alternate slots in Airtable and feed this back to the customer in Voiceflow for confirmation. If the customer confirms, then it's basically the same process. API call to Make, Airtable this time would be available, and update Google Calendar. So that's pretty much it. Looks very simple, I think. So let's get building. All right, guys, so welcome inside Voiceflow. This is a landing page you're going to see once you create your account if you don't have one already. We're going to go here in the top right where it says new agents. We're going to create our agent. Let's name this, Helen's Hair Salon, and create the projects. We start from a basic template and we're going to customize basically everything.
Hi there, this is Laura from Acme Solutions Customer Support.
We don't need that. Great. So let's make a start. First thing we need to do is greet our customer. Say something like, hello, this is Helen's Hair Salon. How may I help you today? And I want to remind you guys that our agent is going to be deployed over the phone. So everything we build here is going to be made and it's going to be built with that in mind. So once we greet our customer, we then want to be listening in and capturing their entire response, entire user reply, and save this to a new variable, not last utterance, because we're going to use last utterance later. Let's name this first user reply. Save their entire response to this variable. So after that, what we want to be doing is creating a prompt. More specifically, a prompt, let's a set step with a prompt. We want to be summarizing what the customer said and asking for their confirmation. Again, because we're going to have this over the phone, we cannot be too careful. We always want to be absolutely sure. We proceed with the following steps, having a full grasp and a solid grasp of what the customer is asking. So, can't be too careful. Let's name this prompt summary prompts. And I already have the prompts ready for the purposes of this tutorial. I'll make sure to include them in the resources below this video. Please feel free to use them if you want to replicate this build or if you're making a similar build. We'll add the conversation history, very nice to have. And the prompt we're going to be using is the following. So you're an AI customer service assistant at Helen's Hair Salon. Start by greeting the customer using their first name when given. For example, good morning, and we have the variable name. Then summarize the customer's question and ask them very politely to confirm if this is what they mean. Question is the first user reply. Basically, if it's blue, there's something wrong. It needs to be black. The variable. Make sure your tone is friendly and approachable. Keep your response short and to the point. Just ask them to confirm their intent in a polite way. For example, you're asking about blah, blah, blah. Is that right? Do not include any other reasoning in your response. And this is pretty much all we need. I'll change the model to mini ChatGPT 4o mini just because it's, I think, consumes the less tokens. The temperature you can set to more deterministic, let's say, and the max tokens, it's more than enough, I think. And we're ready. And we're going to save the output of the prompts to a new variable called summary. Fantastic. And that's it. Now, at this point, we're going to be creating a second prompt and have them executed in parallel. Now, what this prompt is going to be is a type of service prompt. And let me explain why we need this at this point. So type of service, always make sure to add conversation history. Memory is a very nice feature that Voiceflow has built that wasn't there in the beginning. And this prompt is the following. You're an AI customer service assistant at Helen's Hair Salon. Yes, correct. You need to identify whether the customer is interested in scheduling an appointment for one or more of the services our salon offers: haircuts, coloring, hair styling, etc. From the incoming information, first user reply, of course. However, only if the customer wants to schedule an appointment for one or more services, then store the service or services they're interested in the type of service variable. We have not created this variable yet, so we need to create the variable and update it here in the prompt. Do not include any other explanation or logic in your response. Just update the variable with the correct label or labels. For example, if the customer writes, I would like to book an appointment for a haircut, inform type of service equals to haircut. If the customer writes, I would like to book an appointment for a haircut and a hair coloring, inform type of service, haircut, coloring. Do not include the number 0 in type of service. If the customer is not interested in scheduling an appointment for a service, then do not update the variable and leave it unchanged. Now, why do we need this prompt? And straight away, I'll change the model accordingly. Why do we need this prompt? Later in our build, we're going to be introducing an intent classifier, meaning that the customer will be able to take, or rather the agent will redirect to the customer in one of the following 3 paths. The first path will build with a knowledge base for answering questions that the customer may have, such as the price of services, such as where is the salon based. Now, the second path, and this is the charm of this entire build, is going to be the appointment booking, where we're going to be adding the functionality and the capability of our agent to book an appointment for the customer. We'll integrate with make.com and Airtable to achieve that. We are introducing the prompts type of service at this point because the customer may very well say at the beginning, I would like to schedule an appointment for haircuts. So because we don't have our intent classifier yet, and we don't want to be asking again what type of service you would be interested in, so we'll ask him basically 2 times whilst they have already expressed their interest. We want this to be as natural and human-like as possible, so we're capturing the type of service if they are interested in a in booking an appointment. That's why we have explicitly specified here, only if the customer wants to schedule an appointment for one of our services, store the service or services in type of service. If they're not interested in scheduling an appointment, do not update the variable. So we're covering every possibility. We're going to save this to the variable type of service, of course, type of service, and we'll update the variable here as we need. So type of service, type of service, type of service, until we're done. Fantastic. Hope that makes sense, guys. The next thing we want to be doing is give back to our customers the summary for confirmation, of course, so the summary variable. And finally, we want a choice step, let's say, with two intents. First intent is going to be yes, and the other intent is going to be no. So if indeed our summary is correct and they answer yes, we need another set step with the following prompts. So we'll create a prompt. The prompt would, let's call this desired action. And this is where we're going to be creating our different paths. Desired action. Always adds conversation history, and the prompt will be the following. Let's go through this together. So what does the customer want to know? Does he or she want to ask a question, find out about the price of a service, or something else? You must answer with a tag. Your options are the following. General with a label, let's say better. So the first option, the first label would be general questions. These are general questions about our salon, our services, the price of our various services, haircut, styling, coloring, the location of the salon, etc. These questions will be forwarded to a database to be answered. The second label would be appointment scheduling, and this is the second function we've been talking about. When the customer is interested in scheduling an appointment. And something else, finally, anything else that does not belong to the two previous categories. Do not include any other explanation or logic in your answer, just reply using the label. So we're looking for the label only. Let's update to our desired model, set the temperature to deterministic, and that's it. So once, and of course save the output of the prompts to a new variable called desired action. So once our agent answers with a variable, the next thing we want to do is set a condition step with a condition builder. If the variable desired action is, and this is case sensitive, we need to make sure the labels are exactly as in our prompt. So general questions, let me copy this. So if we have general questions, then another path, if we have appointment scheduling, I believe it was appointments scheduling, and if we finally have something else. Oops. Fantastic. So let's create the first path, and let's name this block. This is our intent classifier. Intent classifier. So if we have general questions, the first path would be our knowledge base. So we'll forward all questions relevant to our customer's hair salon, Helen's hair salon, the customer we're building this for, sorry. And the knowledge base, we need a knowledge base research step with the following question and inputs. So we need to be providing to our knowledge base this information. So the user first message, which is, as we remember, first user reply. The summarize problem, we have our summary variable for that, right? The user's subsequent questions, the last utterance, which we haven't set yet, we're going to return to that, and save the answer to variable chunks. Of course, we need to save chunks to a new variable and create the variable chunks, right? Fantastic. We don't need this, basically. We're saving that chunk limits 3 is more than enough. We just want the answer related to the question from the knowledge base. We don't need to pull up irrelevant chunks, so 3 should be more than enough. Hence, based on all that, our knowledge base will now execute, retrieve the answer, save that into the chunks variable, and we need to feed this back to our customer. Of course, we need another set step with a prompts. We're going to create another prompt. We'll name this generate answer. Let's say add the conversation history, and the prompt is going to be the following. As always, let's go through this together. You're an AI customer service assistant. Ads always good to provide proper context every time. Use the information below to answer the customer's questions. Make sure your answer is short and to the point. You're contacting the customer via the phone, specifying exactly the use case for our agent. So incoming information, database information chunks from a knowledge base, the customer's initial question. This is, of course, the first user reply, summary of the issue. This is the summary, and customer's last question, last utterance. Answer directly to the question without greeting or welcoming the customer a second time. Now, why do I mention that? Always nice to test. In my testing, I've noticed that if I didn't specifically and explicitly give that instruction include that instruction in the prompting, the AI would greet the customer for a second time, which of course breaks the natural agent that we're aiming for here. It is very important to answer as part of the business. For example, instead of Helen's Hair Salon is located, answer with we are located. Also vital information. Instead of Helen's Hair Salon is, answer we are, etc. When the incoming information is last utterance, then answer only this question separately without including, answers from previous question. Again, why do I include this? Basically, later in the prompt, we're going to be building a loop intent where we can ask as many questions or where the customer interacting with their agent can ask as many questions as they like. So in my testing, I found that without this instruction, the agent would answer previous questions as well as new questions, because we are providing, of course, all previous correspondence, starting from first user reply summary. So when we are in the loop and we're asking, for example, a second and third question, the latest question or the last question is going to be the last utterance, and we just want the answer to that. We don't want the answer to the first user reply, to any previous question. Basically, we only want the answer to the latest question, and we are making sure we get that. So now let's change this to 4 mini, and that's it. Fantastic. So next thing we need to do, of course, is save the outputs to the variable generate answer, create variable, and feeds the answer back to our customer, of course. Generate answer, and asking if there is anything else we can help with. Is there anything else I can help you with? Fantastic. And we're going to be building the loop intent now. Let's see how that looks like. We're listening in, of course, and capturing their entire response to last utterance. Here is where this variable comes into play. And once we have, for example, they may say, yes, I want to help with this question, blah, blah, blah. Once we have their entire reply saved, we're going to be creating a loop intent now with the set step again. We want to prompt. Let's see how this prompt looks like. We want to be add conversation history. So based on the customer's last response, last utterance, you need to put a label. Your only options are positive response. Use this label when the customer needs help with something else, when the customer wants to ask any other question, and negative response. Use this label when the customer does not need further help. For example, the answer with no helps, no thanks. And we're going to name this loop intent. Fantastic. We're going to be setting our model as before, and that's it. Great. So once we have the loop intents, it's basically the same drill as in the intent classifier, and let's name this loop intent. We need a condition step again with two paths. So if, oops, did I forget to save the output? Of course, always make sure you save the output of this set step. Loop intent variable creates, and let's build a condition. If the loop intent is, and again, case sensitive, guys, make sure it's exactly as the label in the prompt, positive response, then we'll take a step, and if we have a negative response, we'll take another step. I believe you guessed it by now. If we have a positive response, what are we going to do? Go back to the intent classifier, go to block, select a block, go back to the intent classifier, of course, and take the respective path. If they are asking again another general question, of course, the intent classifier is going to take them back to the first path. If they instead ask, I want to schedule an appointment, the intent classifier is going to take them to the second path, which we're going to create in a second. Now, I almost forgot something very, very vital to add here as well. Once we generate the response here, of course, and ask if there is anything else we can help with, we need another prompt here, which is going to be type of service, let's say Vault 2. And this is going to be an exact copy of this prompt here, the original initial type of service, with only one difference. And let me explain why this is vital at this point. So type of service, Vault 2. The only difference is going to be the incoming information now is going to be the last utterance. Everything else is going to stay the same. Now, why have I included this here? Vital to understand. So once we're asking if there is anything else we can help with, we are almost in the loop intent. The customer can very well say, I'd like to book a haircut appointment, which in this case, let's see what's going to happen. If we didn't include this, the loop intent would have the label positive response. We'll be going back to the intent classifier and taking path 2. But in path 2, there is no, and we are not going to include any type of service capture step. The type of service capture step is before the intent classifier. So we will have no way of capturing the type of service they want to schedule an appointment for. It's vital we include this here to cover this, again, potentiality, this possibility. If, of course, they've originally asked a question, general question from a knowledge base. Now, if the second question question or request, it's basically one and the same in our case. If the request or question they want to do is related to booking an appointment, we need to know what type of service they are interested in, because again, the type of service variable we have is prior to the intent classifier. I think you guys get the point why this is vital here. And with all that said, if there is a negative response, we can be saying something like, thanks so much for contacting us. Have a great day, and end the flow, basically, right? Fantastic. And we're going to be ending the flow. Great. And that summarizes our first path. Now let's move to path 2 and build the functionality of booking an appointment with our API steps, which we're going to be including later. So let's say the customer now wants to schedule an appointment. Again, we have captured the type of service, whether it's from path 1 or prior to path 1. And we need to be capturing the following information. Of course, we're going to be talking to them. Great. Can you please provide your preferred day and time. And we want to be capturing this in the capture. We're going to be capturing entities this time, and the entities, of course, we're going to create calendar day, and we want, it's a custom, let's say, data type, and we want to define the formats. Our format is going to be looking like this. Let's say 2025 May 28, right? This is the format we want to be capturing the calendar day at. So we're going to create entity. We're going to inform our agents of the format we want, and of course the time of day. And here I wanted 24-hour formats, so I'll give some values as an example. So that would be 9 a.m., that would be 5 p.m., etc., etc. The format would be a 24-hour format. Fantastic. We don't want to be listening for other intents. Rules is something very nice to have. We can basically specify rules to increase the chances we're getting back exactly what we want. For example, in the calendar day, I've noticed prior in my tests that the agent got the year wrong sometimes, believe it or not, so I'll specify that. The current calendar year is 2025, and also I can include in the calendar day that the day needs to be between Tuesday and Saturday, as Sunday and Monday our client saloon is closed, I believe. So fantastic. Specify 2 rules. And if the rules are not going to be met, we're going to have an automatic prompt saying to the customer, for example, if they ask for a Monday, that's we are only operating between Tuesday and Saturday, please provide another date. Fantastic. We don't want any other thing here. So once we provide these 2, we can continue and say, got it. Now, can you please provide your full name and a telephone number? That's the 2 other pieces of data we need. And again, same drill, we're going to be listening, capturing these entities. So the first entity would be full name, custom, let's provide a name, Ishik is, doesn't really matter. And of course, full name and phone is the other one we have. Data type, I think we do have a number, and let's add a value. Numbers in Greece where our client is based look like this. So let's create that. Fantastic. We don't need any rows here. Don't want to be listening for other intents. And with all that capture, we're ready to put our API step and transition to make where we're going to be building our automation. So let's add an API step. We want to get or post API. I prefer working with the gets. And let's set the parameters before jumping to make and putting our URL. So the parameters is basically everything we're going to be sending to make, and it is everything we have captured so far that is necessary for the process of the appointment booking. So starting with type of service, and the variable, we already have that. It's a type of service, right? Add one more. Now calendar date would be the next one, calendar day. And we have the variable for that, of course. Time of day, right? Name, or rather full name, I can give the parameter name, full name, and number is the last one. Phone, I think, right? Phone. Let's name, oops. Let's name this phone as well. Fantastic. Now let's jump into make and set our scenario. We want to be going here, which is create new scenario, of course. We want to be starting with a webhook, custom webhook. We want to add a webhook. Let's name this Helen's Hair Salon, right? Save this, copy the address and put it here. This is how our API module is going to communicate with our automation in Make. And it's going to be sending all the following data. So let's set this up now. Let's send some test data and determine the data structure is waiting, as you can see, guys. So Alicia Keys, time of day, again, 24-hour format. So something like this. Calendar date, exactly the format we have specified in our variables. Type of service, let's say haircuts. Sends, and fantastic, successfully determined, we are ready to go. Now, the next module we're going to be adding into Make is a text parser module. And we need specifically the match pattern advanced. Now, why do we need a text parser module? In our build, we're going to be having the functionality, and this is of course from before, having the functionality of booking two services. It's very natural that a client calls the salon and wants to book a haircut and a coloring at their visit to the salon. So the type of service can very well have two services that we need to be parsing and processing separately. So this is why and how the text parser comes into play. First thing you need to do, ensure global match is set to yes and continue the execution is set to yes. Why global match? Very important, or this is not going to work as we want. If checked, this module will find all matches rather than stopping after the first match. Each match will be outputted in a separate bundle. Very, very important, because again, we want to be parsing every single service to process later individually. So we can see the variables from Voiceflow already here. Fantastic. We're talking about just the type of service. And the pattern that you want here, you can copy paste for me, is the following. Looks like this, and fantastic, save. Next module is an array aggregator. Now, why do we need an array aggregator? Source module is of course going to be the text parser, and here we want the fallback match. After we parse the services, and it's going to come as a string, everything here on the webhook is going to come as a string, the type of service as well. After we parse this string, we want to aggregate all the services to process their number. In our case, it's going to be 2. We're going to have separate paths in our Make automation for handling 1 and 2 services. This is why we need to know whether we're talking about 1 or 2, and the array aggregator is going to help us with that. So fantastic. The next step is a set variable, and we're going to set multiple variables here, starting with the first service. We want to know which service is the first, which service we're going to be updating first in our Airtable base. And we'll see how that looks in a second. So first service, and we'll write a small function here, gets the output from the array module before, get the first one basically, get the first service. Fantastic. And we also want another, as we discussed, the service counts, which is of course the array. Fantastic, great. So we're ready to start communicating and interacting with our Airtable base, which we're going to do now with a Airtable search module. And before we do that, let's jump into Airtable and see how our base is looking like. So this is Airtable. And here we can be creating a new base here, top left, bottom left. I already have created mine called named Helen's Hair Salon. And we have our table. Now let's set this up with everything we need. As you can see, you'll be presented with the original column, which is hard-coded. You cannot delete, you cannot remove this. I've named this column slot start time. I need another column, obviously, you guessed it, which is going to be a date formats called slot end time. We're going to set the format the way we want, exactly the same we have in Voiceflow. So you can see the correspondence here. We're linking everything as we should. We're going to include the time. We want the 24-hour formats, and we're going to be creating the fields. include time. We don't have any collaborators for now. Default to current date, create field. We also need 2 more columns, which are going to be numbered for our services. And for this build, we're just going to have haircut and coloring as services. We want the default one, and I'll explain what that is in a second. 1, create, fantastic, and 1 more, which is going to be named coloring. Now, what's that all about? The slot start and end time is going to be our slots, and we're going to be setting the logic for all our slots in our Airtable. Now, why we don't use, you may ask, a dedicated service like Fresha or Timely? Our saloon has specified and given us instructions that they want total flexibility and malleability of the slots. What they mean by that is, for example, they can have 30-minute slots, 1-hour slots, 2-hour slots, whatever they want during the day. They want to be setting that with total flexibility and changing throughout the day, meaning that they can set 30-minute slots for haircuts in the morning, whilst they want to set 1-hour slots for haircuts in the afternoon. Of course, all that depends on the human personnel they have there, whether and who can accommodate the services. So Airtable is going to allow us to do exactly that and have total control and flexibility when setting our slots. Let's set some slots to showcase that. So let's choose the current dates. We're going to be starting from, let's say, 9 a.m. And I'm going to set the first slots to a 1-hour slots. Like so. You can see with a date type column, I can set both the dates and the time exactly the way I want. So the next slot we can set to be a 30-minute slot, right? Starting from 10 when the first one finishes and ending at 10:30. The next one, I can set it to be again in 1-hour slot, 10:30 to 11:30, or a 30-minute slot. Let's set another 30-minute slots. 10:30 to 11:30, and so on and so forth. I think you get the logic now. Let's set a couple more. Another 1-hour slots. 11:30 to 12:30. Always make sure you set it. And finally, I'll set the final slots. 12:30 to 1. 12:30 to 1, and you get the point. We can do this throughout the date. So you can see that we have total flexibility setting our slots, and this is exactly what our client needs. Now, haircut and coloring, what do we have here? Remember, these columns are numbered columns, meaning we can just set a number, and in our case, we're going to be working with 2 numbers, 1 and 0. When the number is 1, it's going to mean that the service is available at this particular slot. When the number is 0, it's going to mean the service is unavailable. So our make, which is going to interact with our base, is going to look to our base, is going to search, and when it sees rather than number 1, it's going to proceed with an available service, it's going to book the service. When it sees the number 0, it's going to, or we are going to build some functionality for looking for alternate slots and feeding that back to the customer to confirm whether they are okay with our suggestion. So 1 and 0 are our numbers for this build, and I'm going to set everything to 1. And let's continue with make and interact, create the connection rather between Airtable and make right now. So back in our make, in order to create a connection, I already have mine, but in order to basically do that, you can go to your Airtable, and I'll quickly demonstrate how that looks like. Basically, fantastic, everything here is done. You can go back to your home page. If you press here in your name and you press accounts, will be redirected here. You want to go to the developer hub, don't need that, where it says personal access tokens. You want to be creating a token. I've already created mine, as you can see, Helen Sir Saloon. Create your token. These are the minimum permissions you need to give for this to work. So you need the data read and write and the schema read and writes. You want, of course, to specify which base you want to correspond to this token. Once you have all that done, you can copy your token and paste it here. You can add connection type, token, and super simple. You can copy your token, and that's pretty much it. Fantastic. So we already have ours. You can see our base, Helen's Hair Salon. Our table is table 1, of course. Let's jump back in our table 1. Fantastic, everything we have. And now, very important, the formula. This is going to specify exactly what we're going to be looking for and what our module is going to output. And we have already the formula created. And the formula is the following, and we're going to break it down together. So, datetime formats, and you see these braces, they specify which column in our base we are looking for. Slot start time, again, case sensitive, slot start time. So we have specified the format of the column, concentrate, and we need to change to the correct variables. We have the day, which is the calendar day. We have the time, which is the time of day. If the first service is a haircut, then look if haircut is 1. Otherwise, look if coloring is 1. We want just one output. And basically, with this formula, we're looking at the calendar day and the time of day that our customer provided through Voiceflow. We're going to our base and we're looking for the service we want. If the service is haircut, we're looking for haircuts availability at this time and day. If it's coloring, this symbol basically means otherwise. If it's coloring, we're looking for coloring availability. And that's it for this. Pretty simple, right? So at this point, we've reached a junction when we're going to be creating our different paths and we're going to be branching out. Let's take the simplest path, where the customer is only inquiring about one service, whether it's haircut or coloring. We have searched the availability, and what we need to do is have a router module, first of all. If the service is available, and we're going to set a filter for that, available service, the condition for that, the length of the ID of this module, every module has a number, very helpful. So this is module 5, guys. The length of the ID, we want it to be numerically equal, and we want a numeric operator to, or rather greater than 1. If the service is not available, the output is going to be 0 here. So we won't have any ID back. If the service is available, we're going to have an ID in the form of a string, some gibberish basically, but it's going to be greater than 1. And we can set this to a text operator, but numeric will work as well. So greater than 1, and we need to be setting another rule. The rule would be that we're talking just about a single service. So the length of the array, right, is numerically greater than 1. Hopefully that makes sense. And if all that is met, of course, we want to be updating our base, and we'll do that with an update records module. Again, connect the base, connect the table. And if for the haircuts, of course, our formula will be the following. So if the first service is a haircut, then update that to 0. Otherwise, leave the records from the search module exactly as is. And you guessed it, for the coloring, we're going to have a very similar situation. If the first service, we realize why it's so important to specify the first service variable, it gives us the service that the customer is actually interested in, so we know what to update, what to process. If the first service is coloring, then update that to 0, book basically the coloring slot in our base. Otherwise, leave that record exactly as it is. Don't change that. Fantastic. So the record ID would be the ID from the module 5. And that's pretty much it for the updates. Next, we need a Google Calendar module. Of course, this is what our saloon human operators are going to have access and see, the reflection of the appointment being booked on the Google Calendar. We want to create an event, and again, you need to create a connection with your Google Calendar. It's pretty easy, so I'm not going to get into that for now. What you need is the event name, which is of course the or rather the calendar ID. You want, of course, your calendar. Your event name would be the type of service, right? The start date would be the slot start time, and the end date slot end time. Duration we don't need to specify. We do want though a description where we're going to put the number, and this is going to be in case of anything unexpected happening. Our human agents can call the customer and reschedule, so they can rectify any mistakes, or if they want to reschedule based on an emergency, they can do that. Type of service also include the name here, and that's pretty much it for the module. Very simple. And of course, we want to feed the results of all this automation back to Voiceflow with a web response. We want a JSON body. Here we are talking about a successful appointment at the requested date. So we'll label this with the 200 codes, and the response body would be the following. And let's break this down. You need these brackets, opening and closing brackets for JSON. So status, successfully booked, slot day, slot month, slot time. Now, what I've done here is I've taken the entire slot start time formats, which includes the whole calendar date and the time. As you remember in Voiceflow, we can see the format here. And I've broken this down into the individual components, which are date, and I have the number D for the day, the number M for the month, and the time. Why have I done that? We'll get to that in a bit inside Voiceflow, so stay tuned for that. That's a very, very important thing. Slot ID, we want the ID from the Google Calendar, or rather, no, we don't want this ID, sorry. We want actually the ID from our module, which would be this one. So this one or this one. And service type, of course, we want the type of service. Now, that marks the end for our first path. Very simple, as you can see. Let's take now the possibility where we want to book two services. The key point here is we need to book them consecutively. So when the customer has his first or their first service, rather, let's say this is a haircut, and they're looking for a coloring next, we need to be able to book the exact consecutive slots for coloring. So we need to be able to update both of these records whilst leaving these other two records unchanged. How do we achieve that? Let's see what we have until now. We have a search module for the first service, whether that's haircut or hair coloring. So we need one for the second service, and we need to find the consecutive slots. Let's see how we can achieve that. So again, connect your base, connect your table, and this time the formula will look like this. So same drill, daytime formats. Oops, this is a mistake. This needs to be slot start time. We have the formats. We want now this equal is key. So when the first slot finishes, which is slot end time, we want the next slot to start, which is what this equal sign is all about. And this is how we make sure that we'll be looking for this. If we're talking about a 9 to 10:30 appointment, we'll be looking for this slot for coloring. So that's great. We want the format, of course. We want now the first service. If it's a haircut, then look for coloring. Again, We've booked the haircuts. We want to look for the other service, which is coloring. So if the first service is haircut, then look for coloring. Otherwise, look for haircuts. So otherwise mean if it's coloring the first one, look for haircuts. Again, daytime format slot start time. What that's all about is that we're looking at the same day the customer is requesting, of course, very, very important. And the limits we're going to set to 1. So we have managed to find the next slots. Now we need to take the following possibility, and possibilities mean a router module basically. If this slot is available and this one is available too, we want to update both of them. So we'll do that right now. Basically same drill. Choose your base, choose your table, and let's update both slots. Same exact formula as in the previous path. First service, if it's a haircut, update that to 0. Otherwise, leave the haircut from module 5 exactly as is. Coloring, pretty much the same, right? If the coloring, first service is coloring, update to 0. Otherwise, leave coloring as is from module 5. Now, and the record ID, of course, is modules 5 ID. We need to update also the second service and slots. So we need another update the record module. This time, set your table in your base. Record ID would be the second search module, so number 10. Again, number is very important. So how do we update that now? Let's break down the formula. If the first service is coloring, then it means the second service is a haircut. So we want to update the haircut to 0. Otherwise, we want to be leaving haircuts from the records, the search record, exactly as it is. So you understand the logic there. So when we have established what the first service is. If it's a haircut, we want now to update the coloring. If it's a coloring, we want to update the haircut. So if the first service is coloring, update the haircut field here. Otherwise, leave it unchanged. If the first service is a haircut, then we want to update the coloring fields here. Make sense? Hopefully it does. Update coloring to 0. Otherwise, leave it unchanged. Fantastic. And that's it. Again, we want a Google Calendar and a webhook. So we're going to be creating events. Calendar ID, connect your calendar. Event name, you want the type of service, followed by the name. Slot start date, the slot starts, the overall appointment slot starts here, module 5. So slot start time, and finishes here, slot end time of module 10. Again, we'll include the number in the description for emergencies, phone, and that's it. And the webhook response, feeding back to Voiceflow the results of our investigation. Again, we're going to be using 200s when the requested time and date are available, and we book our clients there. And the response we're going to have is the following. Status 100, successfully booked. Again, I'm breaking down the individual components. We'll see why in a second. The slot ID is going to be the Google Calendar's ID, so event ID here, and the service type is going to be the type of service, of course, and that's it. So this path is also done. We are now successfully searched for 2 services and updated both services in our base. I want to explore another possibility with you. The possibility that the first service is available. So let's say we're looking for a haircut at 9, but the second consecutive service coloring is not available. So what happens now? This is not available. We need to search for alternate consecutive slots at the same day, hopefully, or another day. It's up to us how we set this up. Or a client has requests that we do it on the same day, and suggest an alternate appointment with 2 consecutive slots. So we'll do that right now with the search record module here. And of course, we're going to set our base. We're going to set our table. We want always the limit to one output. And the formula for that will be the following. Let's break it down. Slot start time, we want, of course, we specify the formats. It's greater than day, of course, we have calendar day, time, we have time of day. So it's greater than, and we're concentrating the calendar day, time of day. If the first service is a haircut, then look for haircut availability. Otherwise, for coloring, again, we're looking for the first of the 2 services. And we're specifying here, we want the suggestion to be at the same calendar day that the client is inquiring about. And that's it. Now we need to look for the second service in consecutive slots. So we need another search record. Same table, same base. Formula, 1 outputs. And we have the following formula fields. Slot start time needs to be equal to the slot end time. Again, you remember why and you remember how that works, hopefully. Slot end time from module, this is 16. So we want the second service to start, when the first one finishes. And this equal, make sure we have exactly that. First service variable from before. So if it's haircut, look now for coloring to be available. If it's otherwise, so if the first service is coloring, look for haircut to be available. And again, look for at the same day and suggest something there. Fantastic. Hopefully we found something and we want to feed that back to Voiceflow to confirm. So when we're suggesting an alternate slot, we're going to use the code 404 because there is no availability basically at the requested time. So we're suggesting an alternate time. And we want all this in the webhook response. Slot start time from module 16, basically. Slot start time. First slot ID and second slot ID, and first slot ID should be a second slot ID there. So this is from module 16. Excuse me, we need the second slot ID here, and you guys understand what these are in a bit. Oops, don't delete the comma or this is not going to work. And the second slot ID, of course, is going to be the ID from the second search record module, which is module 17. So module 17 ID. Fantastic. And that's all we need for here. Okay, so we've covered the possibility that we have a service, a single service available. We're updating that, feeding to the customer. We've covered the possibility that the customer wants 2 services that are available. We're taking the first path, we're updating both of them, we're feeding back to the customer again. And we've covered also the possibility that the second service of the 2 is not available. So we're looking for an alternate time, 2 consecutive slots for both services. And we're feeding that back for confirmation. What are we missing? We're missing the possibility where the first service is not available. So what are we going to do? Of course, we need to set the filters here. Sorry, we're talking about multiple services, not one service. And this is contradictory to this filter, which is referring to one service. The condition, of course, the length of the array is numerically greater than 1. And don't forget, we're taking this path, let's say, only if the first service is available. And we're creating another path if it's not. So we need to specify that the length of the ID is greater than 1, because if it's not available, there will be no ID and the filter is not going to be met. It's greater than 1, and we can save this. Fantastic. Now, what if this is not available? Let's specify that. Service unavailable. The length of the ID is equal to 0. Fantastic. And let's set up another rule. Or rather, we don't, because if this is not available, anyway, the filter is going to be met. So we need to be searching for another time, right? Same base, basically. Same table, limits always set to 1. And what's our formula for that? Very simple. Exact copy-paste, basically, of this formula here. We're looking for an alternate time. We're changing the variables to the correct ones. So for service, if it's haircut, look for availability for haircut. Otherwise, if it's coloring, look for coloring availability. And look on the same calendar day. That's great. Now, what if the first service is not available and the customer wants to, right? So, final router module, and we're going to set up a folder here. Single service, right? And we want the length function of the array to be numerically equal to 1. So make sure you have a numeric operator equal to 1. Great. If they're only interested for one service, we're searching this service and we want to feed it back to them. Of course, we want a webhook response feeding back this service. Status 404, we are suggesting an alternate time. So 404, request slot unavailable. We have found an alternate slots, which is in module 19. So we want module 19's slot start time. We want to take the component slot day, slot month, slot time. We're going to see why in a second. First slot ID is, of course, the ID of module 19. And we want the haircuts and coloring availability information and data. Again, all this is going to make sense in a second. Type of service, and we are done. This is what gets back to Voiceflow. Now, if the client is interested in 2 services and the first one is not available, we need to look for a time, alternate time for both. So we have found the first one, hopefully. We need to set up a filter. Multiple services again. How do we know? That's the length of the array. The function length of the array needs to be greater than 1, right? And we need to look for a second one with a search record again. Simply copy paste from this. So these 2 modules are exactly the same as these 2 modules here, basically. Same table, same base. Outputs is set to 1. The formula is going to be the following. Again, equal the slot end time of the first service. So we have the first service here, module 19. Slot end time equals the start of the second service. If the first one is haircut, look for coloring to be available. If it's coloring, look for haircut to be available and look on the same day. Great. And so of course, we need to be feeding back to Voiceflow for confirmation. We're suggesting an alternate time, so 404. And the webhook response this time will look like this. We need to change, of course, some things here. Slot start time from module 18. That's great. Great. First slot ID, so the ID from module 19 here, and second slot ID, the ID from module 22 it is. So this ID here. Haircuts from slot 1, haircuts from module 19. Coloring from module 19. Haircut from module 22, and this again is the data, whether these services are initially available or unavailable. You'll see why we need to know this, and type of service, and that's it. And that marks the end of our workflow inside Make. We're absolutely ready to go and send back the results of all this to Voiceflow. It's been quite extensive, but we made it. We need to activate this as soon as data arrives immediately. Oops, first we need to save, of course, then activate, and let's jump back into Voiceflow and set the parameters we'll be receiving. So we're back into Voiceflow. We need to be capturing the response and set the parameters, set the objects. So let's set this one by one. What we need to know is, first of all, of course, the status, whether we have a 200 or a 400. If it's a 200, the requested time is available. If it's a 404, it's not. So we'll save this to a new variable called status. The next one is this. Is there a problem with this? Status. Right, so what's the problem? Object is missing. Why is that the case? Let's do this again. So status, set to the status variable. Great, add another. So the next one is, of course, the slot time, slot day, and slot month, these components that I've split up, and we want to be capturing all three. So slot time, slot day, and we'll be creating variables for all of them. And finally, slot month, right? Slot month, create a variable, slots month. Fantastic. Next thing we need is the first slot ID and second slot ID that we have in some of the responses, like here. First slot ID, you can see second slot ID. So first slot ID and a new variable for that. And second slot ID. Oops, small mistake. And a new variable for that. Second slot ID. Fantastic. What else we need? Slot 1, haircut and coloring. Slot 2, haircut and coloring. Everything we have here we need to capture in Voiceflow. So same drill. So slot 1, haircuts. We want to be saving to the variable slot 1, haircuts. And the same for coloring. And we'll do the same with slot 2. And again, this is only going to matter if there is a slot 2. So if the customer is only inquiring about one service, this is not going to come into play. So slot 2, haircuts. And slot 2, coloring. Let's set this up also. Coloring. Fantastic. Are we ready? We need the service type, of course. So response service type, which is actually the original service type. Nothing changes there. It's just for us to have it again and process it. So response service type, create variable. And I believe we're done. Just let's say the message, response message, and the object needs to be the same, guys. So let me see. Yes, we do have a message. We don't have the response server type. We instead name this service type. So let's amend that. Oops. Let's amend that. Great. And we are ready. So we're capturing every single object that our webhook response is sending back to Voiceflow. Now, from here, what do we need to do? And let's finally explain why I've split up the formats into the individual components. As you guys remember, the format that we have from our base and we have set from the beginning is looking like this. It's a number, it's a 24-hour format, and I want to remind you that the use case for this agent is going to be via telephone. So it's not really natural to say something like 2025-05-28. Instead, what we want to be saying, it's something like 10 a.m. or p.m. on the 21st of April, for example, or 29th of June. These are random examples, but let's break down the format there. So we need three main things. We need to communicate the AM and PM from the 24-hour format. We need to find a way to communicate and change this to AM and PM based on the time. We need the ordinal suffix, so that will be 1st, 2nd, 11th, 10th, and so on and so forth. So we need a way to have this number 28, 10, 9 to add an ordinal suffix. And finally, we need the month, the actual word. So this 5 will correspond to May. We need to be able to say May. How will we achieve that? It's a great question. Now, Voiceflow has a fantastic module here, which is called function. And I'll make use of this function module to change these formats and these numbers to the format I want. So I'm going to be creating a function. And I already have our function created. Now, these two lines are hard-coded. You can remove them, and you don't want to remove them. The function, in our case, would be the following. We want 3 input variables, and we want to have variable 1, let's say variable 2, and variable 3. Right, let's have this one. And we want the output of our function, which is going to, let's name results, to map all these two variables. Now, this is exactly why I've split up the entire formats into the 3 individual components we need. If we see our function here, variable 1 corresponds to slot time, variable 2 slot day, slot month. So let's map this. Variable 1 is slot time, which we get back from Voiceflow, from Make. So slot time, slot day is here, and slot month is the last one, right? Slot month. And I'll map this to a new variable called final format, let's say. Let's test this function, shall we? So I'll name our function final format, and let's run this function. So let's give a slot time. Based on the time would come in a 24-hour format. So let's say 5 p.m. We are expecting this function to give us 5 p.m. So variable 2 would be slot day. Let's go with 28. Again, here we expect the ordinal suffix, which would be the th. And slot month, let's go with 6, which would be June. Let's run this and see what happens. Oops, 5 p.m. on the 28th of June. So our function works perfectly. This is the format that a human agent will communicate. This is the format that now our agent would be able to communicate. I'm not going to go into the details of the function, but that's for the purpose of another video. But please do let me know in the comments below if you'll be interested in that. So with all that done, we're absolutely ready to continue. Now you guys understand why I've split the overall formats to the individual components here to be able to process them in the function and get the result I want. And let's move from that. So we're getting back our response from make. We don't know yet if the requested time is indeed available or not. We have the format we want to be communicating back. So this is the time to set a condition step to see if the requested time is available or not. And we're going to know that with the status. So if the status is 200, it means that the requested time is indeed available. If the status is 400 or 404, sorry, it means that we are suggesting an alternate time. The requested time is not available. Fantastic. By the way, we want a failure path here, and we want to map both of them to the workflow. Now, why that is, when we send back a 404 HTTP status codes, the GET API is going to interpret that as a failure. For us, it's not a failure. We want to continue suggesting an alternate time. So vital that we map them both to the rest of the workflow. So if the status is 200, of course, we're saying something like, your appointment was successfully booked at, and of course we want our final format here. And if it's 404, we want to say something like, unfortunately, there was no availability at the requested time. But how about, and again, we're suggesting an alternate time, which is all in our final format, which we get back from our make automation. That's great. So here we can end the workflow. And here we need to be listening in for their response. We want a choice step, basically. Let's make this simple with two intents, yes and no, yes and no. Hopefully they'll answer yes. In which case, what we need to be doing is book them in for the suggested time. So we need another API step. Now, the question is, can we use this workflow to complete the booking and basically finish our call with the client? The answer is unfortunately no, because once we include this webhook response module, this workflow is basically terminated and finished. We need to continue and take this to another workflow real quick to book them in. This is exactly why I've included here the first slot ID, and in the cases where we have two services, first and second slot ID. I don't need to be searching again for the records in the next workflow, in the next scenario that I'm going to create. Instead, I have the records ready. I have the IDs of the records I want to book, and I'm just going to be booking the records. So you understand now, guys, all the elements of the equation. I've searched for the records here to suggest an alternate time. I'm taking the results of the investigation in the form of the record IDs. I know exactly what slots I want to be booking based on the IDs, and I'm just going to create another scenario to book these slots. So let's do that right now. Create new scenario, starting with a webhook, custom webhook. Let's name this final booking. And again, let's copy the address and paste this here. Fantastic. So we need to set up the parameters and second slot IDs. So we don't need to search these again. We can just straightly update them. Second slot ID, small mistake here. Following with the haircut and coloring for both slots, and meaning, of course, their availability. Slot 1. Slot 1 coloring. Now we'll explain once again why we need these 4 pieces of data. Slot 2 haircuts, slot 2 haircut, and slot 2 coloring. Fantastic. Following that with, of course, the service type. And we have the response service type. We want the name, of course, and number for Google Calendar, phone number, and we are ready to go basically. Now let's create the connection. So let's redetermine the data structure, send some test data here, some values from before, send, successfully determined, fantastic. And let's finish this workflow. Very similar to our initial one, we want the text parser, of course, to parse the service type in case it includes 2 services in there. Always make sure you set global match to yes. And the text, of course, is the service type. This is the only variable we may need to parse. And the pattern is the same as before. Same drill, array aggregator, in order to be able to know whether we're handling 1 or 2 services. We want the text parser as our inputs, the fallback match here. And we'll be needing to set a variable now. So set variable for the first service, of course. Same thing as before. We want the get function of our array. It's great. And let's get ready to update our services. So we have basically just 2 scenarios, whether we're updating 1 or 2 services. So whatever the case, let's start with the first scenario, single service, of course. The length of the array is numerically equal to 1, and filter is ready. We're updating the service. Now this is the magic of the slot IDs from before. We're updating the first service, right? And it's the only service in our case. So first slot ID is the record ID. We don't need any service modules, just the slot ID. Fantastic. Formulas basically exactly the same as before. So if the first service is haircut, update that to 0. Otherwise, leave the first slot ID, or rather leave the slot 1 haircuts, and this is exactly why we need this. Leave the slot 1 haircut exactly as it is. So we have all 4 records, and I'm referring to these 2 slots, but could be any slots really. We have all 4 records corresponding to the 2 slots, and if we don't want to update something and we need to leave it as is, we have the chance to leave it as is without any service record module. This is exactly why we need all these records from before, and our life becomes much easier. So now if the first service is a coloring, update coloring field to 0. Otherwise, leave the slot 1 coloring exactly as it is. Fantastic. We can save, update to Google Calendar, obviously, right? Google Calendar, create an event, of course. Calendar ID, choose your calendar, event name, or again, same drill, service type, followed by the name, and just show advanced settings, and we can put a number in the description there. Phone number and start date. Oops, of course, slot start time and slot end time, and that's it. And just a response back to our voice flow, just the message basically. Successfully booked. Successfully booked. And close the JSON body, and that's pretty much it. Now let's do the same for both services. So this is a multiple services. Again, when the length of the array aggregator is more than 1, in our case 2, the filter condition is met. So greater than 1, basically. We're updating one by one, so update records. First slot ID is the first one we're updating, followed by the second slot ID. So we have the first slot ID here. Slot start time, of course, is the, or rather we don't need to have this, to be honest. Same exact formula. So copy paste basically. First service is a haircut, update the field to 0. Otherwise, leave slot 1 haircut as it is. And the same for the coloring. If the first service is coloring, update the field to 0. Otherwise, leave the slot 1 coloring as it is. Fantastic. Let's update the consecutive slots. Update the records. Same base. Same table, of course. Record ID now is the second slot ID. Again, we already know which records to update. And the formulas that we have, if the first service is a coloring, update the haircuts field to 0, because haircut would be the second. Otherwise, leave slot 2 haircut as it is. And if the first service is haircuts, then update the coloring fields. Here we are in the coloring fields to 0. Otherwise, leave slot 2 coloring as it is. And with that done, we just want to Google module here, create an events. Again, service type followed by the name. The calendar ID, of course, is our ID. And in the advanced settings, we'll just set the number of start dates, of course, is the slot start time from module 10 and slot end time from module 11. So module 11, slot end time, and that's it. Finally, the webhook response, exactly the same as before, successfully booked. We're going to save this immediately as soon as data arrives, and we are good to go, basically. Let's turn off the scenarios for now, because we can have only 2. Fantastic. Everything is set up, ready to go. Excellent. All that remains is to, of course, we want to be capturing just the message, right? And save this to a variable called message confirmation message. Let's say confirmation message. And all that remains is to feed back to our customer that your appointment was successfully booked. Thanks so much for calling. Have a great day. Fantastic. And of course, if the answer is no here, if they don't accept our suggestion, it's not convenient for them, we can be saying something like, please let me connect you with one of our operators for further assistance. Fantastic. And we can end in the flow. In both cases, ends, actions, ends. All right, guys, with all that's done, this was quite a long build, but we've made it. Let's test it and see what happens. We're going to be testing every single path we've created. I almost forgot we need to be adding our knowledge base here. I've already created mine. It's very simple. Upload a file, and I believe English knowledge base is the name I have for mine, or rather, let's see. Right here, knowledge base Helen Saloon. I'll import that. It's fantastic. And with all that done, I believe it's time to test our agent, see how it's working. So let's do that right now. Hello, where are you based? And fantastic, our summary prompt is firing. Indeed, summary variable is updated. Good morning, you're asking about our location, is that right? Type of service is not updated, exactly as we expect, because we're not inquiring or requesting rather a service, a appointment booking yet. So perfectly nominal behavior, yes indeed. Again, we are confirming our intent. Our agent is now sure that we're interested in a specific thing and exactly what we expect. Let's break up the data here. The desired action label becomes general question. So our intent classifier working perfectly since we're asking a general question about the saloon. And we're taking path one. The knowledge base is firing. We're getting back the chunks, one chunks received and saved to the variable chunks. Then our set prompt and our generate prompt is indeed firing, and we're getting back the answer. We are located in the city center of Trickle at 31st Mioli Street. Is there anything else I can help you with? Fantastic up until here. Following is the loop intent. So I'm going to try now requesting to book a service, and hopefully the loop intent is going to fire. We're going to have a positive response and back to the intent classifier taking path two. Let's test that. Yes, please. I would like to book a haircut and coloring appointment. So 2 services. Let's test that. See what happens. Fantastic. So loop intent, positive response indeed. What else we have here? We do have, or we should have, the type of service firing. Oops. Yes. Just a small lapse here. We need to be saving this, obviously, right? Well, we could forget that. So type of service needs to be saved. This needs to be executed in parallel. So let's test that again one time. It's always good to run into this because we can troubleshoot things. So now that we fixed the type of service properly, let's take this from here and ask the very same question. So I would like to book a haircut and coloring appointments. Let's see what happens now. We're expecting, of course, the type of service variable to be updated, and I can see this here in the debug. So type of service indeed been updated now to haircut and coloring. Prior to that, loop intent positive response label, which is taking us back to the intent classifier, and we can see it here. Desired action is now been updated to appointment scheduling. So the second path as also reflected with the blue square. So exactly what we expect. So message back, of course, please provide me with your preferred date and time, and I will check availability for you. Let's do this right now. Let's make it at 10 a.m. on May 27th. And this is the date we have here in our Airtable for the tests, for the purpose of this test. And so we're requesting an appointment starting at 10 and ending at 11:30, since we're asking for 2 services. And you can see here I've purposely left the second service, the coloring, as not available, so that we can test our agent's ability to look for an alternate type and suggest and feed this back to the customer for confirmation, which is the most tricky, let's say, of the use cases we have created. So let's see what happens when we send that. We're expecting both entities to be captured. And yes, they are indeed. We can see calendar day, time of day extracted successfully. So could you please provide full name and telephone number? Let's do that. My name is Konstantinos Pampadiaris, and my number is... So now we're expecting our get API to fire. And let's see. So exactly what we expect. Let's break everything down because there is quite a few things to break down here. So thank you. Please bear with me while I check availability. We have our API firing and giving us back some information. Let's see what happened here in our make automation. As we can see, exactly as we expect, since the second service is not available, we're taking path 1 because the first is available. The second is not available, so path 1, path B, let's say, where we are searching for an alternate time and feeding this back to the customer. Let's see what we found. So we found another slot for the first service, 11:30 to 12:30, and consecutively 12:30 to 1 for the last service. So we are looking at these 2 slots. We need to update. We're feeding, of course, this back to the customer, waiting for the confirmation. And the reason we can see here an error is not actually an error. As we discussed, the status code is 404, since we are suggesting an alternate time to differentiate from 200s. So it's not really an error in our case, it's just we are suggesting another slot with map failure, or what's registered under failure to continue. Exactly what we want, all the variables being updated. We have the first slot and second slot ID to update in the next scenario that we built. We have the slot day, slot month, slot time. We can see our function working perfectly here. Unfortunately, there is no availability at your requested time. How about 11:30 a.m. on the 27th of May? So exactly as a human operator would say that, our agent is now able to communicate that perfectly. And all that remains is for us to confirm that works fine. So we can trigger our second scenario that we built and just update basically the records. So let's do that right now. That works fine. And we should be seeing that your appointment was successfully booked. Fantastic. Thank you so much for calling. API executed, of course, successfully. And we can see here our scenario working perfectly. So we are triggering the second path because the length of the array, the services, is more than 1. We are referring to 2 services. We're updating the first service, haircut 0, coloring 1, and subsequently we're updating the second one, haircut 1, coloring 0. Let's see the records. Both of them updated here, whilst the other 2 records remain unchanged, exactly what we want. And with that, this build is now concluded. You may ask here what we'll do with the something else label, and this is, we could very well do a function, build a function for canceling appointments. This is a frequent use case in the salon, as I have been informed. So many times clients will call to cancel an appointment, but that's too much for the purpose of this build. Thanks so much for bearing with me, guys, and I'll see you at the next one.